Okay. Good evening. Thank you for coming to the transportation meeting, September 17th. We'll do a quick roll call. I'm Deborah Howe. I see Lynette. I see Ted, and I see Tom, and I see Jim Hale. I don't have any announcements right now. And so we'll just move on to public comment for items not on the agenda. Does anybody have a comment? I don't see any hands, so we'll go right on to agenda items. All right. The first item is stop signs on Santa Isabel. Last week at the Board of Supervisors meeting, there was an item on their consent agenda. It was an item number 28. It was combined with a stop sign project in Cambria, and it said installing 2 stop signs on Santa Isabel, one on the intersection of 7th Street, and then 2 stop signs on the intersection of Santa Isabel and 11th Street. And I didn't know anything about that. And so I reached out to the transportation department. I go, why are you putting stop signs there? And what I was told is that somebody had complained, and they, the first complaint for, I think it was intersection on 7th Street, was back in December of 2023, maybe. And then the more recent one on 11th Street was February of 2024. And through some process, which I don't know yet, but I'm hoping to find out what the process is, they decided that they would hire their engineer. They outsourced this engineering analysis. They contacted Central Coast Transportation Study or something like that. I'll get you the name, which is based in Morro Bay. They sent an engineer out. They studied the intersections, and they said, well, they are all good except for one thing, which is a visual sight line. They're not conforming to federal, state, and county regulations, and therefore we must put stop signs here. And if we don't put the stop signs, now that we've done this analysis that says we should put stop signs, we'll be held liable, and therefore it must happen. Because I had asked Bruce Gibson to pull this item off the consent agenda. I didn't see the need for putting stop signs there, and I expressed a concern that by putting stop signs on Santa Isabel, some traffic would divert over to Santa Maria to avoid having to stop at stop signs. And that street is a very narrow street with a lot of pedestrian and bike traffic. As you probably know, Santa Isabel already has speed humps at their crosswalks at those intersections and many of the other intersections. So the traffic isn't going really fast. It's a 35-mile-per-hour zone. Anyway, just to tie it up in a bow, there was a lot of back and forth between myself and Bruce Gibson and myself and the transportation department and the staff, and trying to figure out, you know, can we pull this from the agenda? No. Can we get this them to not do it? No. And here's my problem. We have so many other intersections that are, in my opinion, much more dangerous. And why didn't they choose those intersections? So I still don't have good answers. I've been told that they're going to get answers to me. Like I said, well, how many times did people complain? And how do you decide which intersection gets evaluated? And what is your process? And how can we be a part of that process? Because obviously we're the people living here, and we would like some input. That is the purpose of this committee. And so stay tuned. I'm hoping that we see progress here, but I can't honestly say that I have seen progress yet. I've had a lot of platitudes, a little bit of like, oh, it'll be okay. And I don't feel like it's going to be okay unless we have good communication between LOCAC and the county and understand what is this process that they're going through. So that's how I started my week last week. And so that led me to item number B, which is what are the Dave, Bev, yes, go ahead. What's your comment?
My comment is I was just wondering which other intersections are you thinking of that need attention?
Yeah, so they're listed on the agenda, and if you don't have an agenda, I'll call them out. Okay, and feel free to add to this very short list that I put together with some other input. So anybody else have a comment before I move on to B?
I do.
Okay.
The intersection, I think it's 7th, already has 3 stop signs on it.
Correct.
And that to me is sort of like, oh no, because I've been in a lot of jurisdictions where they absolutely won't do that. It's 2 stop signs or 4 stop signs, period.
Well,
end of story.
That was one of the triggers. They said it's non-conforming and therefore there must be 4 stop signs, not 3.
Yeah.
So that's getting an additional stop sign. And then on 11th Street, it's just a 2-way stop. And on 11th, as you come down the hill from the top of 11th, from the top of Santa Isabel, 11th is pretty close. And they're saying there's not enough visual distance between the intersection and when you come over the rise. However, they did say that if you took out some bollards and if you took out some landscaping, you wouldn't need to put the stop sign in because you would clear up that visual impairment. But they didn't offer that to the Board of Supervisors. And in fact, Ted, what I'll do is I will send you the analysis, which is very, very detailed. And there were many other things that they called out, like no parking here, and they went to Santa Maria, and so there were a lot of things that they called out, but I don't think that any of those other things are going to get done. Only the stop signs are going to get put in, which I think is just enough to satisfy the liability for the county. So this is great because now I have an understanding of, obviously that's a driver for the county for them to do something. So I see, Dave, your hand is up and I'm not sure if it's up from before or if this is a new question.
Sorry, it was just left up. Thanks.
Okay. All right. So here are some of the intersections that have been named as intersections that we have real concerns with. Some of these we've talked about before. At Vista de Oro, which is where that little neighborhood is on Pecho Valley Road, there is a crosswalk there, and nobody ever stops at the crosswalk. People are coming off of Los Osos Valley Road, taking that curve, going past Monarch Grove, and that is a very, very dangerous intersection. So that's one. Another one is, honestly, if I was going to pick one as the most, well, I can't really say that. One of the very most dangerous intersections is 3rd Street and El Moro. So think about when you're coming out of the business district of Baywood and you start to come out, you turn that curve and there's 3rd Street. And what do you see there? people walking to Sweet Springs, people walking to the farmer's market. And the cars are just blasting through that intersection. It is super dangerous. It needs stop signs there. Ramona and 4th Street. So now we're talking about where Sweet Springs is. That is
Horrible.
horrible, horrible.
A disaster.
It is actually listed as a capital improvement project. And the recommendation is for them to straighten that road. So instead of having a curve, it would be, that road would be straight, and then 3rd Street would come in like this. So it would just be like a 3-way intersection. However, that's like $1.5 million. And that, a lot of that has to be paid with road fees, which we will talk about next. So the chances of getting that done, it's not going to be, you're not going to find it on the consent agenda of the Board of Supervisors. Let's just say that. And then Pismo and 4th Street is another one. That's, you know, again, we're talking about where the road curves, and then people are trying to get out on 4th Street. So, yeah, so there's a left turn from Pismo, and then you have pedestrians crossing from 5th Street to Pismo Street. That's one that Jeff told me about. So what are we going to do? Well, what I've been told by Public Works is that you contact them when you have an issue. And I'm going to put this in the chat. You send an email to Public Works at co.slo.caus. So Public Works at co.slo.ca.us, or you call them at 805-781-5252. And this is apparently how the people contacted the county about the stop signs on 7th and 11th. Oh, the dangerous intersection. We need, please put stop signs. So, and then I was told, oh, well, you can always, you know, tell LOCAC. Well, obviously telling LOCAC doesn't do anything, because I tell them things all the time and it doesn't register. More on that later. So here we are. We have an email, we have a phone number, and I think what we need to do is start calling and emailing and saying, these are intersections. And honestly, I would start with 3rd Street and El Moro and say, we need stop signs there.
And a crosswalk.
And a crosswalk. Absolutely. We need a crosswalk and we need stop signs.
Or crosswalks.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I would agree, but
Yeah.
I'd
So
start with one on two, you know, in two directions, so that you could at least cross both streets. But yes, we need crosswalks and stops.
yeah. So if you have an intersection that you think is dangerous, then I say call that number or send an email and let them know. And if we do it enough times, I suspect it will get to the top of the pile, and they'll send out an engineer, and then it'll get evaluated.
All right, and then they'll come back and say, well, there aren't any sidewalks, so therefore we can't put a crosswalk in, and there are not enough forces to make it a equestrian crossing, and so forth and so on, because you have to do all of that, just like they do at Los Osos Valley Road and Palisades.
But they already have stop signs at some of these intersections. So why can't, they already have stop signs on Fourth Street, on Third Street in El Moro. So they could put two more, and why don't they have any crosswalks, especially in light of farmers market down there? There are no crosswalks anywhere.
Right. So it's an ADA thing. I find out about the federal, well, if you're in a wheelchair, you have to have a place to go. And if there's no sidewalk, well, you can't have a crosswalk without a place to go.
Right, right.
So
You have to have the ramps if you're gonna have
it's
a
cockamamie
crosswalk.
deal, but it's not more than just paint on the pavement.
But Deborah, wait, let me say something, please. The issue of there's an A, B, and a C scale and a D scale, and aren't most of our intersections at like a D level? Can you?
Oh,
articulate that?
no, you're confused, Jim. You're talking about a level of service, and level of service has to do with traffic flow.
Oh,
And
okay.
and so most of our intersections, because we don't have a lot of traffic on a lot of our roads and our intersections, they're not at a D level. D is actually the county, their target level, because they're so underfunded that if you're at D level, that's good enough. And you're only going to get attention if you're an F.
And the
So,
scale actually goes E and F, but yeah.
oh yeah, EF, yeah. So, but, Tom, you had a comment. Go ahead.
Yes, in reference to how to get our opinions as LOCAC recognized by the board of directors. One, sending the emails and phone calls to them, I think would be a good idea, but we have the platform of LOCAC. If we can bring a proposal to the main board, it's like officially from LOCAC, this is our opinion on the stop sign and the our opinion on like the intersections that we think need to be looked at in as well as or instead of. I think that could be more powerful in addition to us individually reaching out to the board of directors.
So I think that's a really good point, Tom. I just want to separate two things. So this phone number and this email goes to goes to Public Works. It doesn't go to the Board of Supervisors. What should have happened and did not happen is that transportation should have brought this to LOCAC and said, oh, we did this analysis and we're going to do these stop signs and here's why. They didn't do that. They put it on the consent agenda. And honestly, if Jeff Krebs hadn't seen it, it would have gone and nobody would have even known that it was happening. So that was my first issue, is like, why didn't this come to LOCAC? Why weren't we told about this? And they were, oh, we're sorry. They just said, we're sorry. And what's weird about it is that they do go to other advisory committees and tell them, but they didn't come and tell us. So that really, it was really hard for me, because as a committee, we work really, really hard for our community. And then I feel like we're not getting the attention that we deserve. So I'm going to try to change that in a nice way. So the idea of working, I am going to be working with Bruce Gibson, and as a result of the many emails that were going back and forth between all the people in Public Works and Bruce Gibson, he said, this is what I want to do. He said, I'm going to do an orientation for not just us, but all of the advisory committees with the transportation department of Public Works. And I'm going to ask them to explain their process and introduce themselves so that you know who's doing what, and they can explain to you how they operate so that we can eliminate this lack of communication or misunderstanding. And I said, okay, that sounds great. because actually the planning and building department already does that very effectively. So I don't know when this is going to happen. It may happen in 2024, but I doubt it. I think it's probably going to happen next year. I will keep asking for that because I think that would be very valuable experience. Dave, I think your hand's up again.
Yeah, thanks. Lynette probably remembers this from 10 years ago. The 4th and Pismo stop sign was brought up ages ago and was pretty much shot down because it was unnecessary, apparently, in their opinion, 10 years ago. So maybe they've changed. And on other streets that I would mention to add to your list, maybe would be 2nd and Santa Isabel, where there's a two-way stop and cross traffic does not stop, and people come down to 2nd Street, restaurants and stuff, and they're not familiar with the situation. And the other one is Ramona and Pine, where I think it's a two-way stop as well. 2 stop signs, but 3 roads. And so that's another possibility. But anyway, there's definitely some places where people unfamiliar with the area would not expect something to happen. But at the intersection of 10th Street and Napomo, there are signs saying cross traffic does not stop. And I don't know if that's a possibility as well, because that's the only place in town I've ever seen one of those signs. And maybe they could satisfy the requirement or whatever it is that the bind that they're in now, because they had an evaluation. Maybe they could satisfy it by posting one of those signs. Anyway, that's just my observation. So thanks for listening.
Yeah, good. That's a good question. And this is what I've been told. Once that analysis is done and they decide what the remedy is, you can't change it. I mean, I really pushed Bruce to pull it from the consent agenda. And I was basically told it can't happen. So, anyway. So the thing is, we just need to know about it in advance. We shouldn't have to find out about it when it shows up on a consent agenda. We should know about it before that and understand what it is that is the problem, understand what the options are to make the correction. You know, if it, you know, maybe cut back some landscaping or whatever would satisfy it, then, you know, that needs to be considered. Anyway, it remains to be seen how that all ends out. I've been told that they can come back and reanalyze it after a certain period of time. But again, we'll see if that actually happens. Tom, you have another comment?
Yes. What are our lines of communication with the departments of the county that relate to what gets fiddled with in our town?
Yeah.
Is it just through Bruce, like, is transportation the only one? Who is our point of contact and such and such?
Well, therein lies the problem, actually. It used to be apparently that the staff would attend these meetings, and that hasn't happened for a very, very long time. Lynette, you probably remember, it was before my time.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, they're understaffed. And so for a while, there was almost nobody in the department, except for Josh Roberts, who really does more street maintenance. And then they hired Jake Hudson, and Jake Hudson, you may or may not remember, was given the task of the corridor study, the Los Osos Valley Road corridor study, and he was heading that up. And he has really been our point of contact. And I've been emailing him for weeks now, wanting to get an update on the corridor study, and I never got an answer back. And then I found out that Jake has been moved over to traffic, and he is now heading their traffic department. And they actually don't have anybody, which in my mind means they don't have anybody really, handling the corridor study. They don't have anybody who's really being the liaison with us on the ground. And so part of it is because they're understaffed, and I've been told they're going to be hiring some people, or at least one person, to come in and take over transportation planning, which would obviously include Los Osos Valley Road. So just stay tuned. I mean, it's really, I think it's frustrating for us, but it's frustrating for them as well, because they don't have enough people to do all the things that they have to do. And I feel like Jake is sort of being moved around. Put him over here, no, put him over here, no, put him over here. And hopefully that his move to traffic was a promotion, because I felt like he was very good. And hopefully the person they hire will also be very good and be better at communicating and keeping in contact. So again, all I can tell you is stay tuned. And as soon as I get information about exactly how they decide which, see, I don't understand. Obviously, lots of people all over the county are sending in their complaints about intersections. So how do they decide which ones are going to get analyzed? And why did they choose 7th and 11th? There have been no accidents there. Well, I take that back. There was one accident, I think it was on 7th, and it was a little fender bender where somebody was turning. But no injuries, no accidents at those intersections. So I need to have a better understanding. Well, we need to have a better understanding of how do you choose which intersections you're going to, send an engineer out to be analyzed. Because once you send that person out, you have to know that if they find anything, then they're going to have to do something. In other words, they can't like do the analysis and then just shove it under the rug. They have to do the analysis, and if it triggers a deficiency, then they have to correct the deficiency. So, it was good education for me. And I'm hoping that I'm making enough of a commotion in that department that they're paying attention, that we're interested, that we're engaged. We want to know more. We want to understand. But having said that, I will tell you, I just found out today, this is not on the agenda because I just found this out today, through my contacts at LOCAC. LOCAC is who financed the corridor study for Los Osos Valley Road. They sent me an email and said, "Oh, we had a team meeting on the corridor study, and I didn't see you there. You must have had a conflict." And I was like, "No, I didn't have a conflict. I wasn't invited. I didn't know anything about it. So how could I be there?" It was online. It wasn't like I had to show up anywhere. So here I am thinking, okay, well, I'm going to start, like, they're going to get it together. We're not there yet. We're not there yet, but we will get there. I promise you, we will get there. So I have some emailing to do tomorrow on that subject, because literally for weeks, I've been sending emails, what's happening with the corridor study? What's happening with the corridor study? And I've been getting no response back. And then yesterday they have this meeting all about the corridor study. So it's okay. I am not deterred. All right. So any more comments about intersections? I think this is a conversation that we'll continue to have. Jim had to leave to go to another meeting. So, and Dave, did you have another comment?
This is Bev, actually. I have a question. I'm wondering, Ramona and Fourth, for example, where it's so dangerous and you can't see what's happening on Ramona or Fourth at that turn. Do they do mirrors at all? Because a mirror would be better than nothing if it were
Good point.
positioned so that those two places could, those two streets, those travelers could see something. You know,
No,
whether
that
you're
is a
going to get hit or
very
not.
interesting suggestion.
Just-
I do not
This
know.
is, I just wondered because we're, you know, it's so, we live near there and it's so dangerous. So
It's terribly dangerous. And it's such a, so many
Yeah.
people travel along there. I wondered if a roundabout wouldn't make sense there. Then the
may I
traffic would
speak?
keep flowing, but nobody would be crossing in front of anybody.
It'd be a lot more expensive than a mirror.
Well, no doubt, but I wonder if it would be more expensive than straightening the road.
Oh, compared to that. I wonder.
Because that's what they want to do, is they're talking about straightening the road. And I know I've walked that road with Jeff, and also when we had our Safe Trek consultants here, and they said, oh, we'll just straighten the road, take out those trees. And Jeff said, oh no, you're not going to get Los Osos to cut down any trees. So
Well,
I don't know. I'm not a traffic engineer. Roundabout, straighten the road, whatever. But Bev, I think you have a very good suggestion about putting up a mirror.
well, it's the least,
Hopefully,
I mean, your idea is great, but it'd be cheaper to do that.
yeah, hopefully. Now I'm just trying to think about liability. If we put up a mirror and somebody gets in an accident, would that trigger a liability? I don't know. Lynette?
This is tangential, but on the El Moro bike path, since I live near it, I find it incredibly scary, and I don't know how to alert students. But since I drive that road all the time, it's like the kids on their bikes, they don't stop, they don't slow down, they just charge right across. And while I crawl to a stop or, slow down so I can see in either direction, the kids don't seem to, they're going a lot faster than I am. So I don't know if there's anything anybody can do to alert the kids. That I'm glad there hasn't been anything yet. But who knows when something might happen. And the other thing, I was just wondering on the 2021 road improvement fee study thing, when does the next one come out? Do we know?
Well, that's next on the agenda.
Oh, okay. I guess I'm not reading the agenda.
It's okay.
Oh, there it
And
is.
on the bike path, we did talk to the consultants, our Safe Trek consultants, about the bike path. And they walked that path with me, and they said, this is not a multi-use path. This is a bike path, and the cyclists are supposed to stop.
Well,
The bicycles are supposed to stop at each one of those intersections, but I don't think that's going to happen unless we get little stop signs there.
yeah. It's just so dangerous. I just don't want to see some poor kid. I mean, the people with dogs, they're always careful. They stop, they look, but the kids on the bikes.
Yeah.
ugh.
Yeah. No, I know. I agree with you. Yesterday I was, I keep driving that area on 11th Street from Santa Maria and Santa Isabel, trying to really understand the situation there. And so I was approaching Baywood Elementary School. I was on 11th Street. So I was at 11th and El Moro, and here comes a child from Los Osos Middle School, and it's 3:04 in the afternoon. Now, 3:04, the kids are getting out of school, right? You would have expected there to maybe be a crossing guard there. There was no crossing guard. Maybe it was too late for a crossing guard. I don't know. And here comes this teenager, and she literally dashes across the street because you have to. You have to run across that street if you're a kid, because the traffic, it's not necessarily going to stop. one of the things that I think could make a difference is they talk about putting stop bars. So it's essentially a line on the pavement before the stop that tells you we'll stop back here. And so at 3rd Street in El Moro, if we can't do crosswalks, painted crosswalks, at the very least, if we had stop lines at the intersections, if we had stop signs, 4-way stop signs and a stop line, I think that could help. You know, it would give this feeling of a crosswalk, even if we couldn't get an actual crosswalk.
It would help. It would
Yeah,
definitely help.
absolutely.
I mean,
Absolutely.
I'm there all the time. I know how bad it is. It's
Yeah, it's very
awful.
bad. So let's move on to the road fees. And look, you know, I've been worried about this road fee thing for a while because we have almost no money in our road fee account. We have $92,000. And I was curious to know, now that we're gonna potentially see more building in Los Osos, it's not gonna be a lot, but there is gonna be some building. And, you know, about the fees and how, you know, why the fees are what they are. And this is what I've been told. There's no change in the road fees, and there won't be any study. They're supposed to study every 5 years, but they're not sure if they're going to do a study. So, and then Josh Roberts told me, you don't have enough money in your account to even pay for a study. which I don't know that that's actually true, but he was kind of like, don't get your hopes up about a study kind of thing. So there's no new study coming out. The road fees are what they are. They're based on a formula. It's not, nobody's doing anything shady with the amount of money. It's calculated based on the number of people and the amount of the projects and this kind of thing. So it is what it is. And it's, if you actually read the road fee in the circulation that I sent out with the agenda, it tells you what the formula is. And if you want to know, I can send it to you. It doesn't mean much to me because it's based on what they figured the population was in 2021 and what they think it will be in 2035. And based on the amount of population growth within that time period, that's part of the equation. And then part of the equation is the cost of the capital improvement projects. And then there's some other quantifier in there, and that's the formula. So that's how they come up with it. Any questions about road fees? Oh, Ted, you have your hand up. Oh, you're muted.
Different menu, different end of the screen. So I read this whole thing through, and it's a typical study that the traffic engineers do. They want to make sure they get paid properly. But the calculation is all wrong. It's based on double what the CDP is based on. So Coastal Commission is not going to allow us to exceed that, and it's 1% a year, which is half what the projection is, or less than half. And it's over a longer period of time, so we're not going to get anything close to what that projection is, and it's a small amount of money for doing anything.
And that's our problem.
Well, it's not the only problem. The other problem is that the urban part of Los Osos, which is most of Los Osos, has certain standards for roads. And so, you know, I counted up the ones that I know of that I could see on Google Earth and measured it all out. So we've got 1.5 miles of roads that might possibly meet the county standards.
That's it.
That's it. and it's in 20 different segments. No, there's 2 apartment buildings that were constructed. They both have sidewalks on them. That counts. But you got a sidewalk on one side. No, that doesn't count because it doesn't go anywhere. And you'd have to cross the street twice to get where you're going. And so when we have that many streets that fundamentally don't meet the standards, how can they go out and say, oh, this one's deficient?
Well, this was exactly my point. I sent a long email and they said, oh, these 2 intersections are deficient. I said, almost every single intersection in Los Osos is deficient. How did you decide to choose those 2 of all the intersections in the world of Los Osos? Why did you pick those 2? Oh, well, somebody reported them. And I was like, well, if that's all it took, I would be calling you every day. So there's something that I'm missing here. There's some piece of information that I'm missing here. Because it's not adding up.
Yeah. So the whole premise of the traffic division is to keep the vehicle traffic flowing smoothly, and never mind that complete streets business, because that interferes with it. Because that's business as usual.
Right. Yeah.
So
So we're in a very difficult situation. We don't have the way to create enough money in our road improvement fee to do anything significant. So that means we have to find some other way of financing road improvements. And I haven't quite figured out what that is yet. But if we can just start fixing intersections, dangerous intersections, that could be a beginning.
Yeah. And the other thing could be to, work on the county to slow down the traffic. In other words, they dropped the speed limit because people protested on Los Osos Valley Road. So you've got all these little streets, the end of Ramona is incredibly narrow, and so is Binscarth, and a lot of these others, and people travel on them a lot. And for them to have a speed limit that's higher than the absolute minimum, which is 20 miles an hour, is crazy.
Yeah.
And
Good
like
point.
up here in Cabrillo Estates, the only place that's a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit is Rodman.
Mhm.
And the only place that has speed limit signs is Rodman. So everybody assumes that, every street's 30 miles an hour. And it's not true.
It's not.
And it's things like that if you look at the Federal Highway Works Administration pamphlet on complete streets, the very first paragraph, the opening paragraph in this whole big booklet says, lower the speed limits.
Well, this is what concerns me about the corridor study. And this is why we need to be in the process before it gets completed. In the Los Osos community plan, they talk about widening Los Osos Valley Road, putting in a turn lane between 9th Street and Pine Street. So what that means is that turning traffic will go into that middle turn lane, and the other traffic is just going to go faster. It's going to go faster. And so how are we going to have traffic calming when you create a lane that's going to be a freeway?
Right. And we don't need that. We need to sort of have somebody declare that Los Osos is kind of like a village, and it's kind of a slow moving place, and you need to adapt if you're an out-of-towner.
Exactly. So that's why I was very, very disappointed to hear that I was not included in the meeting yesterday. Because apparently they took the study and they did it in segments. And obviously we would have wanted to participate in the segment that had to do with Los Osos. So why we weren't included, I don't know. And, if I'm too adversarial, I don't think I'm going to get very far. So I have to be able to, stand my ground, but at the same time, let them know, no, we're actually here to make your job easier, not to make your job harder. Well, I'm not sure that they understand that, but that's the truth.
So if you want committee members to be foaming at the mouth and rabid, you're holding us at bay to make it easier for them. We could act the part.
Thank you, Todd. That is a good point. And yeah, so to be continued. I will keep you posted on my progress on that. So I mentioned the Safe Track, and I don't know how many of you have actually looked at it. I think you've all looked at it, right? And all of that information was submitted to County Public Works. And you know what? I don't think they did anything with it. I don't even know if they read it, to be honest with you. I've never had one conversation with one person about that study. And so again, I'm thinking in terms of, okay, well, what do they care about? Well, they care about liability. So if they actually take that information in that we gave them based on the Safe Track report, and they don't do something about it, maybe they feel like, oh, there's going to be a liability in there. I don't know. But I'm going to find out. I think we need to find out. Because if that's what the problem is, if they don't, please don't tell me XYZ, because then I'm going to have some liability. Then I'm going to understand better how to get my message across. I'm going to have to take a different approach as far as, I mean, we can't just offer up these, oh, go over here, look here. Here's a traffic consultant has handed you this information, and now you're not doing anything with it. Why? Lynette, go ahead.
I was wondering if SlowCog, I'm kind of back to this, took minutes from the meeting so you could see who was in the meeting and contact maybe more than one person and find out who issues the invitations to the meeting, so you can be sure you know who that person is. Because I mean, you emailed a lot of people, but maybe they weren't the people inviting people to the meeting. So yeah,
Well,
I feel like we need a lawyer or something, you know, to explain all this stuff. Oh.
Well, here's the thing. Jake sent me a long email when all of this came down, apologizing. And he said, I'm going to call you over the weekend. I'm going to make myself available to you for a phone call. And he did. He called me on Sunday and we had a long conversation. And I said, please, you know, we want to help you do the best job for Los Osos. And so I'm going to reach out to Jake and I'm going to say, okay, so, because I know he was in the meeting, and I'm going to say, what happened? Why? What did you say? What did you talk about? And why weren't we included in the conversation? And I'm going to start there, because what I've been doing is I've been sending emails that list Bruce Gibson, Blake Fixler, his legislative aide, Josh Roberts, John Waddell, who's Deputy Director of Transportation, and John Diodati, who's Head of Public Works. So I've been putting everybody on my emails, every single person. So I really stirred it up. And that's why Bruce said, oh, well, let's do this orientation and we'll all come together and we'll all explain the process. And I said, great. But that's going to be down the road. It's not going to happen right away. We need to have a communication line of communication now. And we need to understand how the process works now. Because things are happening and we're not being able to participate, and we want to be able to participate and provide input. So, And I'll bring up the safe track thing and say, you know, why aren't these suggestions being taken in? Or why aren't they being documented? What are you doing with this? So, and hopefully I'll get a straight answer. Hopefully. Okay. Any questions, comments? I've asked Josh Roberts to come to our meeting to explain and talk about the road improvement fee concept. He said that they're going to be sending out a new report. It's not a new study. It's just a report, which is essentially just going to be, I think, the same thing. I don't think anything's going to change on it. But he said, well, when the report is finished, I'll come and talk to you. And then I wrote back and I said, well, we really want to talk to you before you finish the report. Well, it's still a draft. I got no answer. So eventually we'll get to the right person. Eventually. So we're at the end of the agenda. So unless you have something else you want to talk about or any comment you want to make, I think we can adjourn.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah. Thanks.
Especially Deborah. Thank you. Good meeting.
Thank
We
you all.
tried.
Thank you, Deborah. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. And I'll keep you posted.
All right.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye.